Last night, I had the absolute privilege to talk to a group of women in person about imposter syndrome. And the title was Why Women's Unique Strengths Are Essential for Modern Leadership. And I talked a lot about the themes that are in my book, Rising to Feminine Power. The event was for Vic ICT for Women, and they're a non-profit organisation that work to increase the entry, retention, and progress of women in STEAM industries. And it was sponsored by Jost& Co, and I'm a principal consultant of Jost& Co as well. And they're a great organisation who support women in technology. So it was just wonderful to speak to people in the room about some of the challenges that women face, in particular in non-traditional areas like technology, and particularly to talk about imposter phenomena, which all of us at some point face. And what I spoke about were particularly what we can do about it. So I just want to spend a few moments giving you a bit of a rundown of what the discussion was about, or what the presentation was about. Firstly, I talked about some of the themes that are in Rising to Feminine Power, and particularly the fact that our notions of power and the model of power that we use to define leadership and also to structure our business and our organizations is probably incorrect, or at least incomplete, because it's informed by a design fault in our environment that undervalues femininity and overvalues masculinity. But the characteristics we need for modern leadership are actually those unique strengths that we see in psychological femininity. So we need to reframe some of the limited beliefs we have about the value of those characteristics, because we need them in leadership, and we need them to really solve the complex problems that the planet is facing, let alone what organizations are facing. And so I spoke about some of those characteristics in particular, or some of those things we need for the future workforce. And I presented some research from Working Futures Institute, and Jost & Co have a great collaboration with Working Futures Institute. And they talk about the kinds of things or capabilities we need for future leadership. And they involve a different way of thinking. So we need to be more critical, and we need an adaptive mindset. So that's about not necessarily using thinking of the past to solve problems of the future, because problems of the future, and actually problems of today and the future, are complex. We used to have to solve complicated problems, but post-digital era, all of our problems are complex. So you need to have an adaptive mindset where you're using creativity, innovation, and you're bringing multiple perspectives in to really solve a problem. And there's an understanding that really you need to be vulnerable in terms of what you admit you don't know, because you're not going to solve problems today with the things you knew in the past. You will solve them today and into the future with adaptive solutions. In other words, by using information that isn't available to you right now. And that means we have to collaborate more, we have to communicate with others, and we have to think of ourselves as really having a lifelong learning mindset. And also, we need empathy. We need to have care and connection for others. So these are the characteristics we need for the future workforce, and leadership has to enable those capabilities. And what we see is that positive femininity, or psychological femininity, has through lines to these capabilities. But despite this, and this is something I talk about in the book, women are still underrepresented in Australian business, on boards. There's still a sizable gender pay gap. So, why is this happening? So we talked a little bit about that. But in particular, I wanted to focus on what I talked about in relation to imposter syndrome, because there's lots of environmental factors. And in the book, a lot of the stories that the women share are about how those environmental influences have impacted their lives, their experience of their own power. So I won't go into that right now. But what I wanted to talk about was imposter syndrome. And everyone experiences self-doubt. especially when faced with new problems or new challenges. But imposter syndrome is that pervasive feeling of self-doubt, that sense of insecurity, despite evidence that you are skilled and successful. So very successful people will sometimes have imposter syndrome because it's fundamentally the fear that we may not live up to the expectations of others or our own internal expectations of what other people want. So it's a fear of our own shadow and the possibility that we may not be good enough. This syndrome is often attributed to that sense of fear and also feeling like we are going to eventually be unmasked as frauds. And so people who are suffering from imposter phenomena will often attribute their accomplishments to luck rather than ability. So when something great happens or when someone gives them a compliment, they're going to say, well, it was just luck, or they're not necessarily going to internalize that acknowledgement. And in particular, often people with imposter syndrome also have a lot of perfectionism going on. That's an important element of imposter syndrome. So they tend to think every task that they tackle has to be done perfectly, and they rarely ask for help. And often people who are suffering in this way, who are really suffering from the self-limiting beliefs that are around imposter syndrome, they procrastinate because they put off tasks out of fear that they won't be able to complete them with those necessarily, high standards that they've set themselves, or they over prepare, spending much too much time on a task and more than it's actually necessary. And the thing is, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy because they spend a lot of time on the task and then they might succeed, and then they erroneously believe that all that worry and all that effort paid off. But actually, they would have got there sooner without those limiting beliefs making them work, double or triple harder to get to the same result. And so this is an erroneous belief, and it's just a story we tell ourselves, because actually, it's not about our competency. It's about how confident we are that makes a difference to our success. Confidence is a trait. It's a belief in our ability to act. And when you believe strongly that you can do something, you're actually driven to act, to do it. So confidence turns our thoughts into actions, and then action makes us more confident. And confidence is contagious. Once you've mastered something, it gives you the confidence to master other things, or at least try other things. And as I said before, it's more important than your competency, provided the gap between competency and confidence is small. I mean, we've all met those people who are highly confident, but perhaps not as competent as they think they are, and they can be a real nightmare. So you want that gap to be small, but it doesn't have to be completely aligned. So you can actually be confident, and then the competency will come because you display behaviors that are about acting, because confidence makes you act. And then people around you will admire and respect you because you're displaying confidence. When people genuinely believe they're good at something, even if they're objectively not, they naturally give off non-verbal cues and behave in ways that make them seem confident. And the other thing we know about confidence from the social research, that it's on its own, it contributes to emotional well-being. So being confident offers more rewards than workplace or personal success together. Confidence is the thing that makes you feel engaged, rewarded, accepted, fulfilled, and purposeful. And on the other side, imposter syndrome leads to negative mental health outcomes, including anxiety and depression. So, what I spoke about last night was some of the ways in which we can understand imposter syndrome a little bit better, and particularly really get to some of the ways in which we can start to address it.